Let me be honest with you, these are mistakes that I am making. And my job is literally like creating content online about helping you get organized and be more productive. And I make these mistakes. Let's talk about some organizing mistakes that you might be making. And don't feel bad because I definitely have made pretty much all of these. All right, mistake number one is you are holding off on decluttering. When it comes to organizing your home, it's really hard to organize clutter. And by really hard, I mean basically impossible. You really can't organize clutter. But I think sometimes when we think about decluttering, we think of it as this like really massive all-day event where we are decluttering our entire lives, but it doesn't need to be like that. You can do really small declutters when you are organizing any tiny space. Don't hold on to the task of decluttering as something that you're gonna do in this big monumental shift. In my opinion, what I share with you guys all the time is decluttering is something you really should be doing every day. There is so much stuff that comes into our house and usually not as much stuff that exits our house unless we make a habit of just constantly always doing little declutterings all the time. If you're holding off on decluttering, it can be a big organization mistake because you can't organize clutter. Which brings me into my next point really well, which is you're trying to organize an entire room. And I think this is why a lot of us hold off on decluttering, because we're like, I'm going to wait until I have, you know, a free Saturday and then I'm gonna tackle that spare room and I'm gonna declutter everything and get it all organized. But the truth is, usually that day doesn't arrive because most of us don't just end up having a free Saturday. And when we do, we probably don't wanna spend it organizing our entire spare room. Not to mention, if you do find yourself with this free Saturday and you decide you're gonna organize the entire room, you're probably gonna get an hour or two in and then you're gonna be like, what did I get myself into? You're likely going to abandon it, or you're gonna force yourself to complete it, but then you're not gonna complete it as well. A way better way to do this is to break it down into little tasks. Typically when we have an entire room or an entire space that needs to get organized, we will avoid it and avoid it and avoid it because it's way too big of a task to really comprehend or like find time to do. So my tip here is always make a list. Take out a piece of paper and write down literally everything that needs to happen in order for that room to get organized. Like, be specific. You're looking for a task that would take somewhere between 5 to 20 minutes. Maybe 30 at the most. And then schedule out those tasks, okay? So you're doing maybe one of them today and one in a couple more days and the other one next week. Most of us, when we face a really big task, we feel overwhelmed and thus we go nowhere. But if you can break it down into a ton of really small, manageable tasks, it makes it way easier to tackle. I'll give you a great real life example. I was visiting a friend's house recently and she had this sunroom. The sunroom has just kind of been sitting there for a year. She has these plans of what she wants to do with it, but she doesn't really know where to start. She had some furniture in there that was a hand-me-down for her mom and she wasn't really sure, you know, what she was gonna replace it with yet. And so basically she'd just been thinking and stressing about this room since she moved into that home. And I said, you know what? Write down all of the things that need to happen in this room for you to make it into the dream space that you want it to be. Step one is you need to figure out what to do with the furniture. Step two is then measure it and find a new rug. I was like, break it down into each step and then just start with the first step because now it's gonna feel a lot more manageable. And I saw her like a month later and she was like, hey, I got rid of that furniture in the sunroom. I did what you suggested. I broke it down into tasks and I did the first one and now I'm deciding, you know, what furniture I wanna replace it with. When you break it down into manageable tasks, it's a lot easier to conquer. Okay, number 3 is you have unrealistic expectations. I hate to break it to you, but you might. And we probably have unrealistic expectations because of Pinterest. Gosh darn it, I love you, Pinterest. But there's also, you know, that part where it's like, that's not real life. Somebody's house doesn't look like that, right? A lot of us think that when we are organizing, it is going to be Pinterest perfect when we are done, because that is what the internet tells us. That's how it looks in the pretty shiny magazine. You know, you have this idea that you're gonna organize it this one special way, like it showed it on that Pinterest pin, and then it's just gonna be really easy. It's gonna work perfectly in your home. It's gonna be exactly how you want it to. But what you need to be doing instead is focusing less on what's like trendy and instead look at your needs and what your needs are in a space. It's not always going to be picture perfect because sometimes that's not always the most functional. Okay, I have a spot of hooks on the stairwell down to my basement. It is just an ugly wall that's like not even painted, just like drywall. I have hooks there where I hang my kids' lunch boxes and backpacks, and let me tell you, it is not pretty, but it is so functional. I use this space every single day. It makes a lot of sense because it's right off my kitchen, which is where we walk into when we come home from school. It is really easy for me or my kids to access, to put stuff away and then to grab every single morning. It doesn't look like one of those cute little mud rooms that I see on Pinterest with the little hooks, and each kid has a name and a basket underneath. I had to think about my needs and my space and create something that worked for me, that maybe wasn't trendy or beautiful or perfect, but it works. I feel like the unrealistic expectations is like, I feel like we have it in our homes with organization, but I feel like it kind of pops up in so many aspects of our life. Like I feel like so many people are struggling with that idea in like all aspects of having this expectation of something. And I think a lot of it, like I said, is because we see something on social media, or we see the way, we see a little snippet of somebody's life and we kind of have this expectation of what something's gonna be. And then when something doesn't live up to that expectation, we feel as if we have failed. And I feel like that's a really great segue into the sponsor for today's video, which is BetterHelp. I've shared BetterHelp with you guys quite a few times because I just think that it's a really great resource. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service that's 100% online. We all need help of different kinds at different points in our life. Like nobody is killing it all the time and nobody has it all together, but finding the time to get into an office to see somebody can feel more overwhelming. And so then we're likely to just be like, I'm just not gonna get to that. I'm just gonna ignore that mental health part of my life. When you get started with BetterHelp, you answer a couple of questions and then they are going to pair you with one of their licensed therapists from a collection of over like 30,000 therapists that they have on their site. And then you can choose what works for you, whether you wanna do a phone call, a video call, you wanna text with this person, you get to find a time on your schedule from your own home. I love this because I feel like it makes it so accessible to so many people that maybe it wasn't accessible to before. If you want to try BetterHelp for yourself, you could get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/butfirstcoffee. That's better HELP. And I will also have all of that information linked in the description box down below. The next mistake you are making is creating piles. Stop creating piles. I'm speaking to myself a little bit because I still, even though I know creating piles isn't the answer, sometimes I still create piles because in our mind, when we take a mess and we make it into a little pile, we're like, okay, look, I did it. I made it into a pile, but a pile is not organized. It's just not. You didn't actually organize, tidy, or declutter the space. You just made it vertical instead. Piles are usually never the answer. Occasionally, a pile or two as you are in active decluttering is fine. You put a little band-aid on the problem, which maybe is fine. It's the end of the day, you're tired, you just want to get it tidied up. You're like, I made a pile, it is done, I am good. That's fine, band-aid for the night, but that is not the solution. We all talk about everything in your home needs a place that it belongs. A pile is never the place that it belongs. I always know when I've fallen into this trap because I will have like a couple of piles and I'll be like, well, that's the pile I'm gonna do tomorrow, and that's the pile I'm gonna take to the basement, and I literally will find myself even saying it to my husband, like, don't touch that pile. I'm gonna do that pile this week. You wanna know what happens? I never get to those piles until I'm like, okay, Callie, time to address the piles. Like once a week I have like a pile, it's like a pile powwow, and I'm like, time to address your piles. The next mistake is combining dissimilar things. I find that one of the easiest and best ways to organize is to constantly think about putting like items together because it is just so much easier in your brain. You're creating little shortcuts for your brain. So any time that you can combine like items. So let's talk about a pantry, right? Here is my pantry. I just have all my dry goods in here, but I wanna combine similar items. I wanna break it down even smaller. Like we wanna niche down here. So I wanna have baking goods on one shelf. I wanna have stuff that's like breakfast stuff, and then I wanna have stuff that's dinner stuff. And then I wanna have stuff that's like snack stuff. I want to combine all of my like items because I go to my oils for one thing, I go to my sauces for another thing. When you have dissimilar things, it seems like a really small thing, but day to day, you think about how much we are doing day to day. Think about how many steps you have to take just to make dinner, right? Everything that needs to come out, everything needs to get put away, chopped and cleaned and wiped and mixed, and all of these steps that you need to go through. By having similar items in similar places makes that so much quicker. It's exhausting less mental energy in your brain to get those things and to put them back. to complete that task. So I am constantly always thinking about how I can niche down to combine the similar items in similar areas. Next mistake you are making is you are expecting no upkeep. You think that once you organize that space that it will stay organized forever. Everything is butterflies and rainbows. Now that you've organized it, it is perfect. It will stay perfectly organized for the rest of eternity, but that's not reality. All organizational systems require that you keep up with them. When they get disorganized, that's not because you're disorganized or the system wasn't correct, it's just because you weren't maintaining them. I feel like I always like to mention this one because I feel like when we have an organization structure that falls apart, we think it's because like we're not cut out for it. We're not organized. The number one room in my home that gets disorganized the quickest is our bedroom. And it's just because I basically spend no time in that room. I wake up at 4:50 in the morning, I leave that room, and 99% of the time I'm not back in that room until like 9 o'clock at night when I'm getting ready for bed. And so things just kind of end up in there and it ends up disorganized. And lots of times at the end of the day, I can walk into that space and I can be like, oh my God, it is a mess. I am a mess. You know what I mean? Like you have that feeling of overwhelm. Also, I feel like there's this theory that I've heard that's totally true where you shouldn't make any important decisions about your life like after 8 p.m. Something about how like your brain stops processing as well, and so you're not able to like think as rationally. So I feel like when I walk into that space at like 9:30 at night and I'm just like, oh my God, get your life together. It's a combination of all of those things. Having a disorganized bedroom does not mean I am disorganized. It just means that space needs upkeep. And I'm not upkeeping it. I'm not keeping it up. All organization structures need maintenance. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to be kind to yourself and to others, and I will see you all in my next video.